Now let's begin with the key questions that we need to ask ourselves before we go to the 2022 election. The first question is, can electoral reform be achieved between now and 2022? And if they can be achieved, who should lead those reforms so that the process has integrity? So those are the two key questions I think we should ask. Now, as to what we mean by electoral integrity, I will refer you to the, it's called the Electoral Integrity Project. I will refer you to their definitions. Go to their website and see how they define electoral integrity. And this is what they say in summary. Integrity depends on, 1, public confidence in the electoral and political processes. It is not enough to reform institutions. We've spent a lot of time reforming institutions. This project is saying it is not enough to reform institutions. Citizens need to be convinced that the changes are real and that the changes deserve their confidence. Inclusiveness, transparency, accountability are all fundamental to developing that confidence. If you go through that list again, well, the first thing that strikes you is that we've never had electoral reform in which public has confidence. And I should know, I've been involved in this business for a long while, and I was involved in the 2016 Windsor reforms, which I'll be mentioning a little bit later. So this is the nub of electoral integrity as defined by the Electoral Integrity Project. Now, what are the things that give the public confidence that the election is, that the electoral process is one they should trust? Now, electoral processes must actually work. In other words, they must be demonstrably accountable. Now, the electoral process must have post-election verifiability. It must be possible to verify that the system worked as should work. One of the things you will notice as you look at the past elections in Kenya is lack of post-election verifiability. Every time we go to court, one of the biggest problems is to actually determine what went wrong. Okay. Number 3, elections must be conducted through open standards acceptable to all. Through open standards acceptable to all. You'll be seeing, as I describe some of the things that have happened in the electoral process in Kenya, that in fact this is not so. And then finally, no, not finally, that elections should not have a large number of wasted votes. Wastefulness of the electoral process. And then all elections should be able to withstand what are called robustness tests. And we'll come back to that in a minute. Now, what is the context for elections in Kenya, which is where I want to start? Now, the context, I'll try and summarize it. First, except for the 2002 election, all elections in Kenya since the first multi-party elections have either been violent or so tense as to threaten to become violent. Okay? Now, since 2007, there has been no election that has a complete set of results. I don't know whether you are aware of this. There has been no election since 2007 that has a complete set of results. And in fact, the worst of this is the 2013 election, where there were like 6 or 7 different sets of results, uploaded at various times on IEBC's website. So if you are tracking that process, by the time you got to August, which I think the last time the last result was uploaded sometime in September, if you compared the numbers, they kept shifting. Okay, so we've never had a complete set of results for any election. Now, the management of electoral processes in Kenya has been opaque and unaccountable and prone to obvious mismanagement and corruption. Each of the electoral management bodies in Kenya, beginning with the ECK and the Interim Independent Electoral Commission and the IEBC, have been caught out in corruption. And you can go back to the Kivuitu Commission. The Kivuitu Commission used to be paid sitting allowances for every day of the week, including public holidays. And they would also be allocated a commission car and then would be paid for their private cars. People don't often realize this. So corruption isn't something that began with IEBC. Corruption in the Electoral Commission has always been there since the early 1992. In fact, one of the early audit reports that I scrutinized in 1995 indicated that the Electoral Commission that year had been paid something like 35.6 million shillings in undeserved allowances. That's a lot of money for those days. And then we have a long culture of impunity in which nobody has ever been held accountable for electoral violence. Okay. what does the persistence of this problem tell us? It tells us two things. One, that electoral failure is politically embedded. And two, that the problem is institutional and structural. It is not managerial and transitory. Unfortunately, when we reform the electoral system, we replace commissioners and we expand the commission. In other words, we do managerial and transitory reforms. The problem is institutional and structural, but the reforms we implement are managerial and transitory. Okay. Now, one of the things we have forgotten is that replacing commissioners may be unnecessary, but it is not a sufficient condition for guaranteeing a credible electoral commission. And I know as we go to the next election, there will be a hue and cry, let's replace commissioners, let's get new commissioners. And we assume that having done that, we should be able to have an electoral system that has credibility and that can be trusted by the public. Perish the thought. That's not going to be the case. Now, if you look at 1992, 1997, 2007, and 2017, the electoral system suffered the same types of systemic electoral failures. So it is not new. We are not here to diagnose any new type of failure. The failures are exactly the same, and they've been the same since 1992. Now, the only election we had as peaceful, as I said, is 2002. And 2013 was calm merely because there was a new constitution and the key players trusted the Supreme Court. That's the only reason why we had a peaceful election in 2013. Okay. Why do we have this situation in Kenya? Let me try and summarize as I see it. Number one, there is no political price for interfering with the election or with provoking violence. There is no political price to be paid. That means that interfering with the election and violence are low-cost, high-return activities. Now, economic theory predicts that if you have a high-return, low-risk activity, people will engage in it. Okay? So it is not a wonder that violence is recurrent and interference with the elections is recurrent. It is because it's a high return. If you interfere, you get good benefits, and the cost you pay is very little. So that's number one. Now, the second issue. In a high impunity environment, it is impossible to create an independent electoral management body. Because, as I said earlier, first, there's no price to be paid for interfering with them. And in addition, which is more pernicious, in addition, any electoral management body that supports the winner, the candidate who wins, can expect to be rewarded in the post-election period. And then number two, it can also escape scrutiny for any misprocurement it does. This is a story of ECK. It's a story of the Interim Independent Electoral Commission. It's a story of IEBC. In fact, in the case of IEBC, it is absolutely scandalous because I was involved in the electoral reforms in 2016, as I told you earlier. And they were given a sweetheart deal to leave office. Rather than being held accountable for the mismanagement and corruption associated with the 2013 election, they were given sweetheart deals to agree to leave office. Now, what incentive did the incoming IBC have to procure properly and to run an honest election? Having seen that those who run dishonest elections and misprocure, what they are likely to end up with is a hefty pension at the end of their term. There is no incentive for them to do that. Now, so what has happened is that the electoral management body has basically been converted into political accomplices of the politicians. That is the fundamental political problem. Okay? Now, the other contextual issue that we need to note is that the transiting of staff from ECK to the Independent Interim Electoral Commission to the IEBC, the transiting of staff over time has also led to the transiting of bad practices. So we have this legacy of transitioning bad practices, bad corporate practice, governance, bad practices and corruption across electoral commissions. Now, if that is the picture, and it's not a very pretty picture that I'm painting, I don't have very pretty things to say about the electoral system in Kenya. But if that is the picture, what are the things that we should keep in mind as we think about the next phase of reforms? What are things we need to keep in mind? Again, I'm going to say some uncomfortable things because I am sure, because there are a lot of lawyers in this room, these are the things they will be proposing to do again, living here. First, constitutional independence of IEBC is important, but it cannot eliminate political partiality or interference. The current IEBC has adequate powers. It is undermined by its own unwillingness to act. Okay? So I am sure there is going to be a proposal out of here. Let us strengthen the IEBC by amending the constitution. Yeah, you may. I am not very optimistic that it's going to make one hell of a difference. Number two, foundational statutes like the Elections Act is a necessary but not sufficient condition for achieving electoral integrity. Security of tenure, which is one of those sacred cows of independent institutions in Kenya. Security of tenure for IEBC or for any constitutional office exists to protect good people from interference. It does not exist to protect poor people, bad people from removal. But what has happened in Kenya, security of tenure has actually never been used to protect good people in office. Because what we typically do is the following. Identify somebody who you know can be compromised and appoint them. And once you appoint them, you give them security of tenure. So they become impossible to remove. What you are supposed to do in appointing, in using security of tenure is to identify good people and then secure them from interference with security of tenure provisions. We've invested enormous amount of money and time crafting mechanisms for shielding people from wrongdoing. I would argue if ever you appointed people who are of unknown provenance in terms of independence, I would suggest they don't deserve security of tenure. This is not something that lawyers like to talk about, but I think that would guarantee the possibility of removal. Yeah? Part of the reason why the IEBC got a sweetheart deal in 2016 is because you couldn't remove them. So you bribe them to get out of office. So you fight corruption by being corrupt. Now, the appointment process of the commissioners must inspire public confidence. The appointment process of IEBC does not inspire public confidence. It doesn't inspire my confidence, and I don't think it inspires a lot of people's confidence. And yet, I'm sure we're going to spend a lot of energy talking about investing in the next phase of appointment of the next commissioners. One of the persistent problems we've had in the past was the ending of the commissioner's tenure on the eve of the election. So you get these commissioners who are wet behind their ears. They're the ones who come to run an election. And the secretariat then runs circles around them. Because the secretariat is the one that has the institutional memory for how elections are conducted. So then we start saying, oh, the Electoral Commission bungled. Of course they would bungle. When you've got a commission split down the middle, you've got a secretariat that is knowledgeable and a commission that is new and is therefore not knowledgeable about how to run elections. Now, the relationship between the commission and the secretariat. We've never had a secretariat and a commission that see in one direction completely. We don't. We always have, they begin well, then they split. So you get the CEO is at war with the chair, and this continues and undermines effectiveness of the electoral management body. So those are the realities we need to keep in mind. The last thing, and I think it was mentioned here earlier, the voters register must have integrity for a credible election to take place.
As of the last election, IEBC declared that the eligible voters were 25,000. They were able to only register 25 million, and they were able to register only 19 million. So we're talking about over 5 million people who are still out there, and that was in 2017. We know we got the data from when the court proceedings around the PBI were ongoing. We were also duly informed that the last update to the voter register was after the Kibra election, before the Kibra elections. So you see, inclusivity has become a major issue in these elections, and as a result, therefore, the major issue being there is very poor public trust or low public trust in our electoral processes. The second core issue, based on our observation, has been the question of legal framework gaps or delays in terms of enacting timely reforms in the election legal system. We are still yet to enact the 2/3 gender requirements as stipulated by the Constitution. We have suspended, for instance, the issue of campaign finance regulations. This is something that is supposed to be coming into effect on this particular election. Remember, it was suspended in 2017, but as we speak right now, there are still regulations which should come from the IEBC. It's supposed to be processed through Parliament so that we can be able to have them at least 12 months to an election. That work is yet to be finalized. And then we've had a culture of having late legal reviews at every election period, and then impunity and adherence to election laws. So all these contribute to a deficit when it comes to the legal framework that is the one that regulates the electoral processes in the country. Our third issue, or the third area of which you think is a core issue, is the challenges in terms of election management itself. We know that we have IEBC as the main election management body in the country. We have the the registrar of political parties being another of the election management bodies. The PPDT is also a major EMB when it comes to election processes. And there are major challenges where we have election technology, for instance. We know what happened in 2017. The cost of that technology, the procurement of that process has always brought up issues. Voter registration has been skewed in very many aspects, and there are still questions about the veracity of the voter register itself. In 2017, despite the fact that we had a voter register audit by PwC just before the elections, ELO conducted another voter audit, a voter register audit after the election. Majority of the issues which were noticed in the original audit by PwC were also evident even after the elections. So very few changes have been done in terms of that voter register. So we still have problems with that. And then the question, of course, of the funding throughout the cycle for the management bodies, poor party nominations, I think I talked about that. Fourth issue, electoral fraud, which of course part of the theme for today's meeting, the electoral justice issues, is hinged on. Non-prosecution of electoral offenses. We don't see voter bribery, violence, and all the other offenses that are orchestrated around election times being prosecuted. And that's a major issue. And even electoral contests, incumbency advantage. You know, we have the people who are in offices holding advantages over those who are coming in what is supposed to be an even contest, even playing group. There are people who are getting money from sources which are not allowable, and you expect these people to be able to participate in a process which is supposed to be even. And then the question of lack of engagement of the people in the process becomes a fraud to the people of Kenya. There should be very robust engagement of the people. And then again, we talked about the late legal framework changes, which again brings a problem to the electoral process. The last issue in terms of the core issues that we had picked up as ELOG was the question of the cost of elections. We ran one of the most expensive elections in the world, not just in Africa, in the world. Best practice is that the cost per voter should be way down below $5 per voter. Our voting and our expense in terms of our elections is over $25 per voter. It's among the most expensive in the world. It is not sustainable, and there's no justice when you make elections, which is supposed to be a sovereign process of a country, very expensive. And we are not even talking about the campaign finance in terms of how much money we are talking about the aspirants, each of them using. Remember the limits which were set by IEBC prior to the 2017 elections, which were not enacted. They were very high. We were looking at figures, even for members of county assembly, which were very astronomical. And we wonder whether then we can, every Wanjiko and any ordinary citizen in this country can be able to participate in an election without having a lot of money. Lastly, let me pick on three emerging issues that we've been able to notice, especially from the last by-election, starting from Kibra, Msambweni, Kabuchai, Matungu, the ones in Juja, which give us a kind of a trend in terms of the direction that we are moving to. Number one is that there's escalation of violence when it comes to by-elections. By-elections used to be very peaceful. There was some quietness around by-elections. Now we are not seeing that. We are having violence in all these local centers where the elections are being conducted. Increase in hate speech, increase in terms of intimidation in these places. Secondly, is a question of election security. Now we see in action, evident in action by the security officials who are supposed to be providing security during elections. And we also see harassment now, increasing harassment of the election officials themselves. So that sends a trend as now we come to the main election. And lastly, the question of the re-emergence of election day fraud. Now, we knew at some point that because of the observation processes which are happening, and a lot of monitoring, the presence of media, the presence of party agents around election day, that there would be some level of delay even in terms of fraud. And fraud, election day fraud transitioned to the preceding activities. It could be done in the voter registration process, but now we are seeing evidence of ballot stuffing, which was an old crime, you could say, in terms of elections, but now it's coming back. And then now we're seeing also the men in black, the disruption of E-Day processes themselves. So that sets the stage in terms of what we are thinking about is going to happen in terms of the next elections. And those are the things that we think, from an election observation point of view, need to be a major consideration as we continue this discourse in terms of how we can be able to better prepare our country for the next coming elections.
Speakers before me have manifested a lot of tranquility and peace. Permit me to deploy some intellectual violence in this discussion. You see, history at times gives you the best, and often it just gives you what is available. No wonder, therefore, the discussion of electoral justice in Kenya should not be isolated to the Constitution, the structures, the legislative framework, and the institutions that oversight this process. I premise my discourse on one fundamental issue: the people themselves, the people you want in office, either elected or appointed. And this is fundamental, because you can purpose to have a free and fair election. But who are you going to elect? Let me start from what a constitutional scholar by the name Professor Ben Nubweze says. He says this: the president coordinates and therefore dominates both the executive and legislative processes of government. And he poses this: unless parliament is in fact independent of the executive, then the sovereignty of parliament, to which African leaders are fond of constantly referring, means simply the sovereignty of the executive. Do you relate with this insofar as Kenya is concerned? Does parliament give you the results you want? Of the three arms of government, you should not find surprise in the statement that the judiciary appears to be the one that is most prepared for this election. And indeed, they are. Parliament and executive are not. If I had 2 hours, we would have had a very long discourse on this issue. But why is it that Parliament is least prepared? The other day, a very good friend of mine, a retired judge of the Court of Appeal, asked me, Lord Nelson, why do you want to go to Parliament? I told him, King Richard, I've accomplished my 3-point agenda as president of the Law Society. I need to go and fix Parliament. Then he told me, no, you can't go to Parliament because it is a house of unlearned fellows. I told him, no, King Richard, we have so many of our colleagues there. Then he told me, they're not learned. Perhaps they're just educated. Now, let me depart from what Professor Nogweza says about the responsibilities of elected leaders insofar as the Constitution is concerned. He says this: no constitution, however strongly entrenched, can be guaranteed against the temptations of power on the part of the executive unless there is an independent legislature to act as a counterpoise against such temptations, and unless there is a strong national ethic against executive pretensions. The other day, we were told you do not require a degree to be a member of the National Assembly or of the County Assembly. I do not want to espouse a view on that point. But let me just read what Nogweza said as he concludes. It is members by virtue of their education and standing in society who are eminently and well placed to act as the articulators and guardians of the nation's ethic. And the Assembly provides them with an excellent platform from which to try to mobilize public opinion against abuse of power by the executive. A transformative constitution, the best in the world, has been in place for the last 10 years. Have the people you've elected to Parliament been able to oversight the executive? Have they been able to rein on taxation, excessive borrowing? Have they been able to ensure that there's equity and parity insofar as 2/3 gender representative is concerned? Have they oversighted the executive when it comes to public appointments and declarations? These are germane points that you must consider, even as you ponder on how best to guarantee electoral justice in Kenya. Permit me to say this. It is a game of musical chairs. The problem is not with the people. The problem is with the people who you've put to sit on those chairs. Often the people you've put in these chairs will cobble arrangements befitting their peculiar situations, power sharing. You see, on the 28th of February 2008, a coalition agreement was cobbled, the result of which was to create a hybrid presidential and parliamentary system in Kenya. How far did we go with it? Did you see the bickering between the Prime Minister and my very good friend, the former Vice President? We're being told this is an enterprise that will guarantee electoral justice and fairness. And Senior Counsel, just allow me to fire at close range, because it is at this point that we need to deploy intellectual violence. 10 years later, we're being told we need to do exactly that which we did on the 28th of February. Is that the solution? Will you find reprieve in these measures you're putting in place to guarantee electoral justice? Perhaps that's a question that you need to consider. Justice Ewan Kriegler, the judge given the responsibility of giving us a solution to the problem that bedeviled us after the contested 2007 general election, said this in his executive summary. Kenya's constitutional and legal framework relating to election contains a number of weaknesses and inconsistencies that weaken its effectiveness. This legislation needs urgent and radical revision, including consolidation. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, Kenyan, all that Kriegler said we do has been done. We have consolidated all electoral laws. We have reformed. The institutions are in place. They are capable of delivering. What then is the problem? The problem is not the chairs. The problem is the chair ladies and the chairmen. And often, you will find them seated on seats like this, beside a table like this. On rare occasions, it's you Kenyans who provide the foothold for these tables. What is the solution? You must say no. Stand up. There will be no table for them to sit. You see, let's compare the democratic process in Commonwealth Africa since the fall of Berlin and the communist state. Why is it that in Ghana there has been profound stability whenever we go for elections? How is it that we don't experience the problems in Kenya? In Zambia, there was a complete metamorphosis of what the people of Ghana and Zambia intended. You see, in Ghana, it was a little bit drastic, it was violent. But there is stability. Unfortunately, many of us here may not even remember the name of the president of Ghana right now. Do you? Yes, it's a good point. Do you know the name of the president of Zambia? Good. Sacrifices had to be made. Chiloba, the one who took over from Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, had to be jailed for the message to be passed. Flight Lieutenant Jerry Rawlings had to take drastic measures in Ghana to guarantee democratic sustainability. People cannot be allowed to be corrupt insofar as regime changes are concerned. It's as simple as that. You may undertake all these discourses. They will take us nowhere. Let me progress. Sorry if I look at like a professor of law with papers strewn all over. Maybe one day I'll be a professor of law. Fast forward, 9th March 2018, the Great Grand Handshake. What did they say? This is what they said as they stood on the staircase of that building to guarantee you that they want to bring change. There are changes that are required in our system of governance for us to succeed, and we have been in a process of reform to deal with them for the last 20 years. Really? Yet, despite all the reforms, we continue to have deep and bitter disagreements, ethnic antagonism, and divisive political competition have become a way of life. I'm sure they do not have in their library the Kriegler report. This is how they conclude. His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta and His Excellency Raila Odinga have agreed to roll out a program that will implement their shared objectives. Shared objectives. How many of them? 2 individuals. The program shall establish an office and retain a retinue of advisors to assist in this implementation. They have mandated both Ambassador Martin Kimani and Mr. Paul Mwangi to oversee the establishment of this program. Now, this is where I give accolades to my mother's age mate and my very good friend, Martha Karua Senior Counsel. She said no. She was alone. Many here sought to pursue a Sir Neville Chamberlain approach to pacify the aggressor. To what end? Well, I don't want to unpack this because a demand letter may be drafted and forwarded to my office as I speak. Where's Benta Opante? Benta, these are the real issues. Executive overreach, inability of parliament to reign supreme. I don't know how much time I have, but the 2 minutes will do. The 2 minutes will do. Let me tell you what your Solicitor General said insofar as the need for this constitution. Please maintain some silence. It is very rare that you listen to the President of the Law Society. Thank you. He said this, that the BBI process is supposed to preempt perennial election-related violence and marginalization, and it is imperative for the process to be concluded before the next general election, scheduled for next year. That is what he said. Now, friends, you see, you may be looking for these solutions everywhere, but the solutions may not be there. They are here in your midst. And this is what Kriegler said in conclusion. In order to start trying to prevent a recurrence of the tragic aftermath of the 2007 general elections, Kenyans, from president to peasant, will have to do an agonizing stock take of where their country stands, from president to peasant, bourgeoisie to peasant. They will have to show their commitment to the rule of law and its equal applicability to all citizens, irrespective of economic, social, and political or any other belief. And it makes the conclusion quite affirmative. No, the solution does not merely lie in constitutional and legislative changes. The culture of impunity in Kenya needs a fix too. The relevant law enforcement institutions also need to do their jobs properly. I think I'm not competent to add to what that great jurist said. But because I'm an artist, permit me to show you two cartoons that exemplify what is happening. This is the Standard of June 2001, must have been on the 14th. It's by Gado. You've seen it?
They can't see it from there.
Okay.
Unless they project it, which
Fine.
they don't have.
Let me just read in brief what it says. Now, Wanjiku, I don't know who is Wanjiku is speaking to. She says, we don't seem to know what the problem is with our elections. We keep going in circles. Then she pauses and proceeds. Manual versus electronic system. We procure new systems and register new voters every time. Then Wanjiku proceeds. And remember, the other gentleman on the other side, who often feels he is Wanjiku whenever it is convenient, is just looking. And then she says, we create new laws while keeping old and troublesome ones to benefit the few. And after a long pause, the gentleman who always feels he is Wanjiku says, indeed, IBC is ready to conduct a referendum. Lastly, there is a cartoon in the Daily Nation of the 22nd of June 2021 at page 18. It is very historic. Bloodlines. We do not have a parliament because it has been emasculated. We do not have an opposition because it has been purchased. That is the state of affairs in Kenya. Kenyans, on the part of the Law Society, this is my commitment. I've asked my members, especially the youthful ones, to call off the game, they will stand up and there will be no table for these individuals to sit on and determine the fate of Kenyans. A majority of my youthful advocates will run for elective office. They will go to Parliament. They will be in the National Assembly. They will be in the Senate. And I want to beseech you all Kenyans, irrespective of your professional qualification, to take the opportunity. Otherwise, the game of musical chairs will never end. We'll have these discussions today, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, and maybe we'll be back here 10 years and review what Kriegler has said. I don't want to be doing that. Thank you.
We are in a messy situation, and nobody is going to pick up the mess. We have to do it ourselves. It's our mess collectively. And when I talk of individual accountability, I'm reminded of the recent US elections, where the Secretary of State of Georgia is reported to have been told by President Trump, just find 11 million votes.
11,000.
11,000. And he just answered, Mr. President, I got a job to do, according to their constitution. Where Mike Pence, a loyal vice president of the ex-president Donald Trump, was under pressure not to go and validate the Biden vote in the Senate. But he just told his buddy, Mr. President, I got a job to do. I am using those to demonstrate individual integrity, which becomes institutional integrity. In Kenya, I want to give you, maybe I shouldn't mention the exact case, but I'll leave no doubt in your mind. Recently, we had a very good judgment, which demonstrated the individual integrity of the bench, and I will not mention because it's sub judice. And occasionally we have such good judgments that demonstrate integrity. What I'm trying to say is that you and me have a job to do. We just have to check ourselves and stand up to be counted for our country. We will not have credible elections until we have credibility ourselves, until we have integrity. I want to recall that the 2013 general elections were accompanied by several presidential petitions, which were all dismissed. In 2017, there were again several petitions, but the one by the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, the main challenger to President Uhuru, was allowed, sending seismic shockwaves, not just in Kenya, but around Africa and the world. Disappointingly, when the recent ruling came, it failed to provide jurisprudential beacons for us to follow in similar cases and indeed in all petitions. Remember, our elections are simultaneous, the 6 of them. So if there was infirmity in the presidential petition, guarantees that there was infirmity in the entire process. Granted that the Supreme Court did not have power over the elections in the lower courts. But how did we apply that ruling? I am saying the ruling itself failed to give the beacons of what we can apply, and we have had contradictory rulings. Just to demonstrate, since that presidential election was annulled because the IEBC, mainly, IEBC was not forthcoming with revealing information to the court, so the election was totally unverifiable and unaccountable. Very good, because the Constitution says so in Article 86. How come then that those of us who petitioned, when you go to the court and you want the documents, you want the, what were they called, the kits, the electronic kits, the BVRs, you want those, you want forms, whatever forms you need to verify. The question the court asks you is to justify why. How can I justify that which the Constitution justifies? What does it mean when it says accurate, accountable, verifiable? How do I verify without those documents? Why should I be asked a question that was asked before 2010? We are following the jurisprudence, pre-2010 jurisprudence, and this is to the courts because really we must examine these things. The rules of today should be telling litigants that anybody before the court who wants the records, the IEBC should keep them ready. Why should the IEBC waste our money hiring lawyers to oppose applications to bear the records? In whose interest? Is that a transparent institution? Some of these things we don't even need rules. The person manning that, if you have taken time to read the Constitution, you would meet the litigant at the court door with all the boxes of the documents they want. And no server would be asleep, whether in France or in Kenya. I am very glad that the IBC chair has now said he will have multiple servers and he will open all of them. My plea to them, open the 2017 servers first so that we find where the problem is and we rectify it now. There is no law barring that institution from opening the servers just now so that we see all of them. Why? We want to audit ourselves. And I do believe that the petitions we are giving the court will lessen in number if we make it automatic for parties to be shown the records. The records may just show you you have no petition or determine the petition in your favor instantly. The IEBC will have individual accountability if they know that the records will be opened automatically. No presiding officer will inflate the records because they know they will be discovered immediately the election is over. We are here to find solutions. We can't give all the suggestions from this podium, and I'm hoping that later on there will be technical working groups before the series of the next conferences so that we can give suggestions on how to put right what we have missed. We can also have mechanisms of policing one another, because if I can't trust you, I will police you. And likewise, you will police me. If we did that both at the county and at the national level, all will be well. For me, I know the changes we need do not require any constitutional amendment. The Constitution already says it. A simple rules, simple legislation. For me, you can change the IBC 1,000 times. The result will be the same. We changed Keboito. We then changed the next person. We have changed Hassan. And now we would, maybe there are some who would want to change Chebukati. The chair you bring will be the same. We need to change the management of elections, not individuals. It's the systems we need to go for, both at the national and at the local level. Think about that. And ask how many times we have to amend the Constitution when it's already giving us the mechanisms of doing so. What we really need to do is to implement and safeguard the Constitution. A country with deficit of trust, how were we supposed to embrace BBI when it did not want to be questioned, when it was not inclusive, when it was intolerant? I don't want to go on and on. I just wanted to say that's an enterprise you cannot sell to a majority, you know? Let us go back to the drawing board. My party, the first round, I led them to present to those people at KICC. And we told them, one, you are wrongly constituted because this is not national. These are the whims of two people. However large the parties are, that's not Kenya. Call the others. Even the small parties can, through CMD, send one person. Call the religious. Call everybody. So, and at that time, it was not a constitutional thing, it was a national dialogue. Let us once again read the Constitution and remember that President Moi, whom we sometimes love to hate, accepted to dialogue with the opposition when there was no constitutional framework. How dare you refuse to dialogue with us when the Constitution demands of you? These are the simple things that we must ask each other. And I want to ask it brazenly so that you may remember. I don't want to be polite. I just want to be bad. Now, I want to say one other thing. That the 2017 elections were held under a very dark cloud. The murder of Musado. Shame on us. We went on with the elections as though nothing had happened. Even the IEBC, from among whom he had been he had been plucked and murdered from that institution. They went on, but we too, we went on as though nothing had happened. He was killed a day after he had said that he will safeguard the integrity of the IT system. He had to go. It is the surest indication that there were among the political elite people hell-bent on violating and manipulating the IT system. No wonder then that Kenyans say that we have elected leaders and computer-generated leaders. This is a fact that not the courts, not us, the petitioners, have articulated well in the courts when we litigated. Because it has a bearing. If we go to the next elections without solving that issue, because again, shame on us, the murder of Musado remains unresolved, we are not going to have free and fair elections. We must have elections on due date in 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a job to do as Kenyans. This is our mess. We've got to clean this before then.
And Article 1 of the Constitution, this provides the provision that all sovereignty belongs to the people and may only be exercised in accordance with Constitution 2010, which you all applaud as one of the most progressive documents anywhere in the world. It therefore goes without saying that elections must be conducted in the manner that reflects the will of the people. We also agree that elections are a process. They are not an event. And if we take that to be true, and 92% of us seated here believe we are not prepared, how then can we say that August the 9th next year we will see the next general election? Therefore already we are saying we are compromised. How many of us here are prepared to abide by the provisions of Chapter 6 of Constitution 2010 on integrity, demanding integrity, accountability of the elections? We've heard it even from the spiritual leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2022 general elections will be conducted on the backdrop of the nullified 2017 presidential elections. The decision the Supreme Court imposed an onerous responsibility on IEBC to ensure that elections are conducted strictly in conformity with the law. As the 2022 election cycle gathers pace, a cloud of anxiety hangs over all stakeholders, and we've seen it here demonstrated with regard to the preparedness of the IEBC. Article 86, to which my senior counsel colleague Martha referred, of the Constitution provides that at every election, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission shall ensure that A, whatever voting method is used The system is simple, accurate, verifiable, secure. Mother, you forgot the word secure. Accountable and transparent. And B, the votes cast are counted, tabulated, and the results are announced promptly by the presiding officer at each polling station. Now, I want to thank Chairman Chebukati, because recently has come out very clean on this. He said the results at every polling station is announced are final. Why is it there's always a dispute? Recently, we had, I'm sure you noticed, by-election, senatorial by-election in the county of Machakos. And it took us, because we got people at every polling station, young people, university graduates, sharp minds. And they counted and tabulated the results, and the returning officer announced that. But it took us another 24 hours because they insisted the final results will be announced in Machakos. Now, ladies and gentlemen, either we are sticklers for law or we are not, because this Article 86 is very clear on this matter. I want to say that my colleagues in One Kenya Lands, the Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, the Honorable Gideon Moy, and the Honorable Moses Wetangula are fully in agreement with what I'm saying. But I also say that the next conversation, I want to suggest all of us commit, because these commitments that we've been asked to announce will be meaningless unless we look people in the eyes and ask them, do you love this country? Are you a believer in chapter 6 on integrity? Because the process, which is already flawed, has seen a situation where we are antagonizing one Kenyan against another. I have it on authority of an ambassador or high commissioner who must remain nameless. That recently on a tour of the Coast Province, they found the conversation has now moved from dynasties and hustlers to haves and have-nots. Now that is dangerous. Is this the kind of process that is going to lead to a free, fair, accountable election? And I agree with the mother that the next elections will be on the 9th of August 2022, and nobody can do anything about it. First of all, that matter was not even canvassed under BBI or by anybody. And therefore, the only time this country can fail to have that election is if we are at war with another country. And even if we are at war with another country, and please check the relevant article, I think I give that to my learned friend Havi to check, the article under the Constitution, that it's on a 6-monthly basis that both houses of Parliament, the National Assembly and the Senate, must pass a resolution to postpone the election. During wartime, not another time. Now I'm talking to a senior counsel, and I see that my friend is nodding. Not another time. But even if the country is at war, after every 6 months, the country, the same houses must pass another resolution, affirming the earlier resolution, but so that cumulatively you cannot postpone an election during wartime for more than 12 months. That is how clear the Constitution is. Therefore, please, let's disabuse ourselves of any notion that elections will not be on the 9th of August next year. Therefore, that is the truth. And if we are saying 92% of us we are not ready for that election, what are we saying? That's why I'm demanding that all of us sign these commitments. We will not have anybody representing anybody. So, and I want to say I'm a friend of a civil society in spirit and everything. That's why when I saw this invitation, I came running. I've actually a human rights lawyer in my own house. My own daughter is doing a PhD on international human rights. And so it is important as a country that we take the bull by the horns. IEBC. I agree again that today as we congregate, I've seen that the IBC are saying they've received money from the exchequer. They're going to roll out now voter registration. And they are targeting the figure of 25 million Kenyans. And of course, we also know that this is a continuous process. But how many young Kenyans have gotten out their IDs? We heard it from Wako, their representative. In fact, she almost sent a chill down my spine because she said, the youth are asking, why should I vote in the first place? If indeed getting employment is a privilege and not a right. Now that is a state of mind of the young Kenyans. And I want to say that they should not lose hope because this is their country. We all know we're operating under a very difficult challenge right now, COVID-19, and my urge is if 15 million of us can immediately get the jab, we can open this country. Indeed, you see, President Biden has already opened the United States. Why is it that Bishop, Your Grace, Bishop Martin Kivuva and the SUPKEM chair, please help us. There are people misleading Kenyans that if you get a job, you have only 2 years to live. Please, again, you know, I believe in the freedom of the social media, but some of these things are retarding even the possibility of getting our young people the jobs they so much desperately need and which should be made available to them. I do not intend to talk for long, but I recall in the case of Musando, one feels very bad. And Kenyans need to know who killed Musando and why. Mr. Chebukati, I agree that there's no time now, no time to even think of changing that. Now what the process is now ongoing to bring on board another, how many commissioners? 4. Because we have already 3 in place. And I agree that Chairman Chebukati should take it as his responsibility to restore the integrity and the dignity of the IEBC. But do you have time to bring on board the other 4? Therefore, this process, I urge, must be concluded expeditiously, so that then, within the remaining 13 months, the new commissioners will be acclimatized. But you know, the Commission has not addressed the issue of elections technology and has only been offering public assurances that are devoid of practical evidence. Procuring technology close to elections is deliberately preparing to fail. It is imperative that the Commission transparently procures relevant technology by putting into consideration some of the concerns raised by stakeholders on the integrity of some of the service providers, and Honorable Wandai was able to read even the conclusions of the Public Accounts Committee with regard to the performance and the procurement process of IEBC before the last general election. Mass voter registration is yet to be conducted, with millions of youths having obtained identity cards since the last election. I mean, very many have not even gotten them. Considering that the Commission has to revise and compile the register of voters and roll it out at the polling stations for verification, all this within 7 or so months, clearly points to an institution that is out of its depth in trying to carry out its mandate. Election-related procurement, especially with regard to ballot papers, remains opaque, and the Commission is yet to publicly share how it will depart from the quagmire it faced in the last general election. I want to address our sister Anne Ritu, the Registrar of Political Parties. I think that the political parties need to be strengthened. Why is it that every Tom, Dick and Harry can today go register a new political party? Because then you're going to have not only entrepreneurs, but political party entrepreneurs, but the people carrying briefcases ready to give out nomination papers to anybody who comes to them for money. Now we are talking about, I think, close to 100 political parties. Is this the country we need? I also want to say the registered political parties should really be given the mandate even to intervene where coalitions that are public documents and are registered with the registered political parties remain even undisclosed. I want to suggest, for instance, the NASA coalition agreement, which is a public document. I want to suggest the registered political party makes it public so the Kenyans know, because again, as we go to the next elections, we want leadership that can be trustworthy one of another. It was somebody, I think Mother repeated it when she said there's a massive trust deficit in this country, particularly between leaders. So the leaders who commit to work together for a certain period will do so. And if we go before the registered political parties, we do not want to be told, my hands are tied. Even if they are tied, do something about it. Because this is it. We must open up this country by opening even our own minds. And therefore, the political parties tribunal was really a mess, I'm sorry to say. The previous, a complete mess. Where people got bought with money and you get the judgment you want. Please, chapter 6, if all of us are to internalize the values, the national values enunciated under chapter 6, will make this country greater by far. Therefore, once again, the conveners, I thank you for this invitation. I suggest you do not end it here. Get everybody, particularly those who want to run for presidential elections, to come and commit before Kenyans and before media that they are not going to cause confusion, they are not going to cause violence in this country. I've said elsewhere that this country will never again see the violence we saw in 2007, 2008. We will never see it. The reason is simple. Under Constitution 2010, we have domesticated, that is a word, all the international treaties that govern decent conduct of men and women. Article 19 of the United Nations Convention on these things, rights. I met a gentleman called Mugambi Kiai. He gave me, he's a member of the civil society. His card is written Article 19. This is it. We have domesticated this. So nobody, Kenya is no longer an island. You can't kill your people and get away with it. Never again.